Hello and good morning, everyone. Oh, hang on, I'm turning off a light. My name is Andrew Hildebrand, one half of the Jupiter Lighthouse team. On the other end is Dylan Engelman. Are you there?
Hey y'all.
Hello. And we've been working on a game for a little while. I think we joined on with Dogira in November or so. But the roots of this game go back way farther than that. I think we started work on this in 2015 or maybe late 2014. I don't know. It's been a minute.
Yeah,
Um,
just to give everybody else a heads up as well. Obviously, what we're showing off here is in, alpha stages of development. So do forgive us if we see a couple of bugs pop up in it or if we have to rejig a couple of things. This is obviously not at a point where we want to get it into people's hands yet. We're just showing off the general concept of the game, showing you off the actual art of it, and I suppose explaining what it's all about.
that is correct. So let's see. Where is my play button? I guess I'll just jump into it. Um, we came on and we kind of knew what Dojiro was hoping to get out of a game, and we kind of knew what we had, and we wanted to find the point where those two things merged well. So we started working on this game, and the title is Humaniquarium. So long word, um, but hopefully it's good.
Well, it's the best thing about having a nice long name. There will be no confusion when people are Google searching it. That will be the result.
We have cut away this small slice of the world. It is all ours. And it is a slow unfolding game. So it's meant to be played over a generous course of time. And this is the starter tank, actually the tutorial, a little self-promotion. And it kept getting the name the jar game because, as you can see, our starter tank is a jar, but it's actually more like a bonsai game where you're growing small bonsais in different types of planters and taking care of them. And there's little people that can run around, and you need to keep them alive as well. So normally you would start in that mason jar and go and deal with that section. We've kind of skipped ahead now to a little bit farther on. Uh, so you can go in here and swap out your planters, pick out something new, and that should show up down here. And we've also included projects where you can unlock blueprints and start construction on them.
So essentially, what you're looking at here is kind of a build your own world type environment. If you'll allow me to use that kind of phrasing, Andy, I know it's all inside a bonsai jar, but this allows you to essentially build your own little, would we call it mini ecosystem?
Yeah, I think that is totally fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as Andy was saying, it's a nice slow roll game that it's got, I suppose, elements of an idle game. It's got elements of a builder. It's got Andy's Windows key. Awesome.
Sorry.
So yeah, elements of idle, elements of builder, and I believe the character animations you were saying are not in this current build, but we did have them in a prior one where you're able to actually go in and see actual characters running around in this environment. Is that right?
Yeah, so we had an issue where if we had too many interaction points, it would just kind of hang up. But Dylan actually fixed that just before our meeting, and I pulled, and we might have a scene with somebody in there. So, it's not just about taking care of one bonsai habitat either. This is kind of about growing a community of these little entities. And so we can open up our little journal and all kinds of things that we're tracking and little sub game elements that are going on. Um, yeah, but let's go to the shelf. So the shelf is kind of where you can house all of your different bonsai, all of your different little habitats. And in a future version of this, this is kind of the hub world. We would like to have the characters also running around in here and potentially climbing all over everything and just being small nuisances. But for now, it's just
Yeah, so when you start off in game, you'll be building your own bonsai environment. And I think what a lot of people would like to hear on that was, how is it pertaining onto, how does this hook to blockchain? So what we're looking at right now is, and this likely won't be in the first version that we'll release, but those bonsai trees, those actual little ecosystems, I believe, Andy, we're looking at turning those into actual NFTs that can be traded, can be rented out to people or loaned to people, etc. Do you want to talk us through a little bit of that?
yeah, I'd love to. Um, so that is the idea, is that these trees are seeded, so every single one is completely unique. They grow very slowly over time as you take care of them. They get stronger and larger and more unwieldy. And they also generate things for you in the game. I'm not going to dive too deep into that right now, exactly what that is. But um, so the more you have on your tank, the more that you're generating as a whole as well. But the idea was to see if we could take an NFT and almost turn it into like its own living thing that you're contributing to. You know, you were the original founder of it. And then, like, months or years down the road, that thing could still be evolving and changing and becoming better based on the time that you've invested into it, based on the time that maybe other people, your friends, or just the community have invested into it as well. So we're running with a lot of ideas like that. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's all been fantastic to talk about too. I think it was one of the first things we actually spoke about on, how can we basically use blockchain to add value onto this rather than tacking anything on for the sake of its blockchain. And this is one of the big things for me that when you're looking at something kind of as complex as somebody being able to develop their own little mini ecosystem, and they're able to, have that they can, loan it out to other people. There's a generative in-game reward that can come from that. Then the fact that they can last forever and keep evolving, and you can keep, you can hold on to them. You can start trading in, picking up new ones. All that stuff, I think, really suits the type of ecosystem for blockchain really well, while adding something to the game rather than just sticking something on for the sake of saying, it's blockchain.
yeah, I agree. I think that was pretty important when we were developing this initially, was just we wanted to make sure that like the game stood on its own, like that, you know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yes.
And no, I can attest to both Dylan and Andy on that both parties had no interest in just throwing blockchain into it. We wanted to see, where can we make this work? And this is one of the biggest things for me to see that, people will obviously be very proud of their own creations. When you're looking at these systems that you can spend months, years, etc., developing and growing, that this is something that you want to have actual ownership over. You want to be able to loan it out to people. You want to be able to trade for other items as well. And that's something that blockchain comes beautifully into. When we're storing all of this data on chain, such as the seed that's used to grow the main tree in it, the different models that you might have in there, and the different kind of things you've planted on it, like It's fantastic in the sense that there's so much data in it that it can have so much use across the wider blockchain. Other games might be able to grab, even just an image, like a still image of what you've built to put into, essentially your JPEG form if you just want to show it off a little bit. But then there's even much deeper stuff that we'd be able to develop out from that. I mean, all the data will be on chain. If somebody wanted to make another representation of your bonsai tree, fully possible. Yeah, it's just really exciting to see that kind of stuff being built.
It's been a lot of fun to work on. It is hard, but it's been pretty great.
Yeah, and we've obviously been thrilled with the progress that we've seen so far. And I mean, as you were saying yourself, this game is in development a lot longer than the couple of months that you've been working with ourselves at Dogira. Jupiter Lighthouse, I believe you're 7 years old. Am I right in saying that?
I think that's about right. Dylan, is that correct? I think it's about 7 or 8, somewhere around there.
Uh, Jupiter Lighthouse. The company is only a handful of years old, but we that's because we didn't found the company until like 3 years into some projects. But yeah, I'd say we're about 7 years old if you include that pre-time. And Jupiter, Andy and I working together before that, we called ourselves Space Puppy, and that goes all the way back to 2007.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, I mean, the actual development time that we're looking at for Humaniquarium itself, obviously, it's much longer than a small couple of months. You can see with the level of care and detail that's being put into the actual model world, and also the fact of how unique it is. I mean, this is kind of the great thing about being back in an environment that is able to, I suppose, propel indie development again and be able to use blockchain as an advantageous tool. You get to start seeing very unique concepts all over again. So, when you were building this all those years ago, when you set out to start making it, I suppose what was in mind back then? How have things kind of evolved as time went on?
I think back then I had just come out of developing at Vicarious Visions, making a lot of kids' games and small toys, and so my headspace was in the micro and wanting to work on something small. And I had only worked on one mobile game up until that point, so I was thinking a lot about like having a tiny space that I could carry around with me and, just riding on the bus and like play around with my little environment and see, what I could get it to do that day. Um, and then it got shelved, and it just sat for a very long time. I think Dylan and I ran into a point where we realized that this game, it seems very, very small and it doesn't seem like there's a lot to it, but every nook and cranny you unturn, it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's one of those things
Yeah.
you kind of have to play to experience. But we were so far in over our head back then. We
Well,
started this game
absolutely.
and we had to stop. And we didn't come back to it until, 6 or 7 years later, where now we feel like we both have a robust enough skill set to really tackle this project and do it right. So,
Yeah, and that's insane. Like I remember some of our first kind of internal presentations that we did would always grab me was the very minute attention to detail. I believe there were a lot of unique animations were in there for, some of the many, many items that you've put into the game as well. So that's where these games kind of flourish. Like you could build something like this and essentially you could do the phoned in version where it's just, plop things down and that's it and go. But you haven't. The level of detail that I've seen on display for every small little bit of this game so far has, I think it's really encompassing of the indie mindset that it's building something that you want to see come to life rather than building something just to, basically cookie cutter, I have a deadline, that kind of stuff.
yeah. And as I'm sure you've noticed, my deadlines are questionable at best. But it's because I don't want to stop working on things until it's right and it's served the thing that's being made. And
Yeah.
it's really
And
refreshing.
that's respectable in itself. I mean, we don't want things getting just shoved out the door before they're ready. I mean, it took us a while to even, set up, we'll do a screening of this one and start having a look around at it. Similarly, like on the Dogira side, we have, other smaller projects that are in development, and it allows us to support larger projects like this where we want to see kind of the love and care that's gone into it to date continue. And we want to see that come out in, a completed product rather than stating, you have 2 weeks, get something out, that kind of stuff. I think that's really where I think that's really where a lot of indie development philosophy is, that you want things to be right. Now, granted, we will always have issues in kind of, letting our baby out into the world as it was. You never like releasing a game, but I think that this is something so far that has really benefited from a great amount of time in development.
I
So
think
kind of
there's
on that, if you don't mind me asking, what does the overall gameplay loop, or how do you imagine the overall gameplay loop so the community can kind of get an idea of um, that kind of minute to minute gameplay?
oh, all right. Um, so let's see, which one of these scenes was I able to get into? It's gonna load me into the right one. Keep in mind, oh, somebody's running around in here. Okay. I didn't realize that we had that one in here. So you'll have one to several tanks, however many you're managing at a time. And if we come into, let's see, backpack, what items do I have? Oh, that's a pain in the butt. Oh, let's go ahead and start crafting some stuff. Right now, creative energy is stuff that is generated anytime that the little critter in the scene interacts with anything. And it's sometimes generated when you interact with things too. So we're kind of in a partial debug mode right now, skipping around, but I wanted to show you all how this works. So you'll be finding new blueprints, unlocking those new blueprints, popping over into builder mode. Let's see. Oh, no, I don't have anything here. Well, you can create a workbench and then start constructing your own items to like place and decorate your scene. Now, the planter and the bonsai and the critter all have special needs specific to them. So different things that you might add might pull it in one direction or another, create a more deserty landscape or a more rainforesty one. And you're trying to strike a good balance of those different stats. So it's a
Yeah,
lot of
so
yeah.
when you have all of those kind of, in order, you have, the tank exactly the way the critters wanted, the tree itself is looked after. I'd be correct in saying then you're generating more energy, which you can then invest into, more items to put in there, or even kick off a brand new bonsai. Would that be correct?
That would be correct. And
A1.
there's another idea that I would really like to tackle, and we were talking about it last night. I don't know if it's ready for uh,
Yeah, no, we
main.
can chat about anything, so you're
Okay,
welcome
cool.
to. Yep, go
All
ahead.
right. I'm always hesitant to reveal too much, but
No, no, I
I
mean, I suppose I'll just preface it by saying, there are a lot of things that we all want to see going into this when it comes up to the initial release. It's very likely that we're not going to get everything in there, but this is going to be something that will see development post-release. So
true.
everything that we talk about, yeah, it might not be in release number one, but these are all things that are possible to come in over the future.
So this idea is one that's been kicking around on both the Jupiter Lighthouse and the Dogira side. Like we've heard it come up time and time again. So I gotta feel like it's the right direction. And that's the idea that your shelf as a whole, everything that's being generated, is not just going towards what you're unlocking, but it's also going towards a global pool where it's unlocking stuff for the community. So like if you were there, if you had stuff going on at that time, um, you have healthy plants that were generating on a shelf, regardless of like what kind of player you are, you get the rewards out of like all of the community's time and investment. Um, the main idea that's been kicking around from that is different locations where you can plant things. So maybe having like a fun map with all different types of areas around it. And so the community can work as a whole to unlock different sections of that and then like slowly move themselves into it and have a new environment to play in.
Yeah, I mean, for I suppose the more crypto focused people, what they're probably comparing this to now is, a staking pool for NFTs. And that is essentially what the technology would be running behind it. That, you'll be able to create a global community and begin staking what's essentially your bonsai in an NFT form towards community progress. Which like that stuff is again just a brilliant use of blockchain in my opinion. Obviously there'd be technical stuff running behind it that we'd need to, spend a decent amount of time doing testing on, especially when you're staking an NFT. But I think that's an amazing direction to see things going in.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited.
Well, if anybody does have additional questions, please do throw them into the AMA questions channel, and then myself or Elijah will be able to pick up on them then.
I will begin asking those questions if Andy's ready to transition to the community time. Was there anything else you wanted to cover before we start diverging into questions?
Um, Maybe. The only other thing is that I do want to say that another thing that is on the slate, on the docket for like what we want to tackle, is that we don't want to only have the slow rolling gameplay. We are definitely thinking about social games and that aspect, something faster and more minute to minute enjoyable. Um, that's kind of it.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I'm again that's actually so I was wondering if you kind of wanted to divulge a bit of info on that stuff. But that is one thing that I have loved seeing on it. If you don't mind my saying at least that I suppose we've already kind of given a small bit of info on it that there was a small comparison to Fall Guys made, I believe, at one stage. Do you want to expand on that a little bit and how that kind of mini game system would work?
Yeah. So right here in your main menu, pop open your little journal and you have stats, you have your resources that are in your pocket. This is a goal system that the character like wants different things and you can give them. Rivalry is kind of how we want to do seasonal content. And then right here, games. Boom. Right there, you just pop into the games menu and you'll have quick play access to hop into different game modes that you might play. Oh, I forgot to take that out of there. Oh, my bad.
You're good, you're good. And
Okay.
so yeah, this kind of stuff, we absolutely like. This is something I absolutely love. That there's a lot of idle games that I would sit down and play for, essentially nearly playing it in real time. Now I don't quite have the time to do it anymore, unfortunately. So maybe the idle format would be what I'd personally play nowadays. But if you were to think back on, essentially your stuff like Cookie Clicker, etc., I always wanted a way for, my active time to be rewarded a little bit better. So if you're not the type that wants to just sit back and leave things grow, you've got systems like this in here which can, have additional rewards put into, so you can get your real-time gameplay fix if that's what you're up for. And just as a forewarning, as I'm sure many people have hit the screen on there, the games that are going into it obviously are not finalized or anything like that. So please don't expect to see that as final content.
Yeah, no, I put that in there as a gag and I completely forgot to take it out. My apologies.
It would work great in it. I have to say it would be a great addition to it. We might be competing with ourselves, is the only problem.
Oh no.
Yeah, definitely room to look at stuff like that though.
Yeah. I think that's one of the focuses of this. You just touched upon this, making sure that people who are interested in the idle and people who are interested in the active both have like a space to go. And I feel like when I started researching blockchain games, I was coming in as somebody who did not know a lot about it. And so we are definitely leaning on making a game that is like very welcoming to all types of people who might be interested in just like, oh, I want to play a good game, and then they can slowly learn about all this other stuff that's up and coming.
Yeah, essentially it's where I think blockchain has to go in the very long term. That like if you look on Twitter with I think Ubisoft announced that they were working with an NFT based game project. I know there's a lot of vitriol as it's Twitter. That's that's a general response to everything. But if you looked at this game from the front on, like there's a lot of things that blockchain is enhancing on it, but it can all be done without specifically telling somebody that that's running on blockchain. That it's adding functionality without needing to shove it in your face. That if you just want to pick this up and play by yourself and essentially have, more of a single player experience where you're just growing stuff, then the game is welcoming in that aspect as well. And if you want to kind of delve deeper into it, there's a lot more for people who are interested in it. So I think it's kind of getting the perfect mix.
Yeah.
Cool.
All
Is there
right. Are we
anything else you want?
oh,
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to run through on your side, Andy or Dylan, before we jump into a couple of community questions?
I am always up for more questions. I will just talk right on through them.
A1, over to you, Elijah.
all right. All right. All right. Let's see. Um, this was a quick one for Owen, but I think we can actually touch on this. We'll just we can refer back to your post about sunflower farms, but how can we make sure that our games are not going to bog down the Polygon network? Um,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
it's something that we've talked about a few times. So the reality is that for a lot of games that are going to be, running on blockchain, there'll have to be stuff that is essentially validated by blockchain, rather than it being, as we said before with Sunflower Farms, they did the full game logic on blockchain. That is where blockchain will be going over the next 5 to 10 years. Right now, even the fastest networks, even Polygon with its theoretical top speed, is not able to do a very complex game like this running. There's a lot of calculations that will be running in any one game. Even in Sunflower Farms, that was essentially running one kind of game loop command every time that it was saved, but that game loop was enough to bring down the network. So what we need on stuff like this is, rather than running everything directly on blockchain, blockchain is what we can use to validate everything. Like if we need, to confirm a random number or anything like that, that comes in on chain, and that's, a brilliant use of it. We'd have to, look towards having dedicated servers that will be able to run online logic or do any anti-cheat as needed. Similarly, again, it's very easy to validate, minor cheat detection and stuff like that via blockchain. So everything you're seeing running here, like a vast majority of that is able to run on the client side, and we're able to plug in a dedicated server end, which will be connected directly to on-chain then in order to do the rest of it. Basically giving us something in the middle that's able to bring the load off the Polygon network, but still make good use of it in the place that we want to see it being used. So yeah, that's been something that we've discussed from really day zero, making sure that we're able to spread the load out and not overwhelm a network. As you can imagine, the amount of logic that's running in the background on a game this complex, you don't want that running with hundreds or thousands of people at the same time and doing everything on chain. There simply isn't a blockchain that would be able to cope with that level of data. So yeah, but great question, and it's something that we're going to continue looking at. The last thing we want to see is, a network going down the minute that we launch this game or any others. So always at the top of our mind.
yeah, and just to book on that real quick, on some of the calls that we've had with the developers here, they've been really thoughtful about how they want to segment those things out, how to really control things very well. So it complements how Owen thinks about things uh, at a very like deep level. So I have very little worries at this juncture that we're going to run into issues, because I think we are assessing all the middle ground options that we can do there.
Yep.
This one is for Andy. How big is each bonsai tree going to feel in their tanks in the world? Is there a limit to how big they can grow?
Um, I'm going to imagine significantly larger than this, depending on the age. We're going to be doing all of this procedurally. Just to kind of get into a little tiny toe into the technical side of this, these were generated in 3D Studio Max and imported into Unity. Now, when we go to rewrite this seed code, we'll need to make sure that it works in Unity. But there's no real upper limit to how large something can get. It'll basically be, does it fit in your tank? Because at a certain point, um, the tree has to stop because it can't fit in the tank anymore. And so it'll just be whatever the largest size of tank that we provide is. And I would imagine at least twice the size of this easily. But you'll have to have a shelf that large. So, or a space to put it in. But
A supplemental question from me. The bigger the tree, does that mean that there might be more little critters that come with the tree, or how do you have an idea of how that would work, or is that still something that's
oh
um,
no, yeah, you are On point. So along with a larger tank, you can fill it with more homes. You can have more people in that little specific pot. And we haven't touched exactly too much on how critter movement will go from one tank to another as far as like living there goes. But I think at some point down the line, if we get far enough, like they will move on their own. And so you might have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 that just conglomerate in a single pot.
That's pretty neat. Love that idea. Next question. What kind of audio elements do you imagine the game will have? Obviously, we've kind of kept the presentation without any audio. So what kind of direction are you thinking you might go in with that?
Um, Definitely not something that is so abrasive that you turn it off. I feel like sometimes I hop into games and I really enjoy them, but the first thing that I do is look for the mute button. So it'll probably be something subdued for sections like this. If you're going in just for like a relaxing chill time, we're not gonna browbeat you with the music and whatnot. Of course, in the social games where it's more actiony, that's exactly what we're gonna get. We have some audio people in mind that like are just incredible, and we'd love to work with them again, but we'll see how that all pans out. Otherwise, it'll be me making some audio.
There's been a couple questions with this next one that I'm kind of going to merge them into one. Is there going to be any sort of crossbreeding or pollinating function with the NFTs and the trees themselves? Or is that something you can't speak on at this time?
Well, now that seed is planted in my head, so I'll get back to you on that.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I love it, but oh man, what can we do with that? That's exciting.
Okay. The next one would be so we're growing trees. Is there going to be any other sort of cultivation that happens? In this case, the question asker asked if they were going to be raising animals or pets or anything like that.
There are pets in the game. You can indeed have pets. We didn't take it as far as like a farming sim necessarily, because at a certain point it becomes too real. Like little people have a little pig farm. I mean, it sounds pretty cute though, so I'm definitely not against it. But at the basis level, there are definitely pet companions that your little critters will keep. I think there's one of them in here somewhere too. I don't remember where though. There's a toad. Oh, there he is.
Love the little guy. Is there going to be any sort of RNG evolutions of the NFT characters? In this question, I think we're mainly talking about how are the characters going to change as you kind of develop in the game. Not you
Um,
develop, but like as you play the game, how do the characters change?
when this was originally designed, we actually have all the models for it and everything too. These went through an entire life cycle. So you would start out with a tiny critter and you would take them all the way to their end of life, and then they would get a little gravestone. Um, we've paired that very far back. We've stayed just in the early stages right now. And I think it's particularly just for speed right now. We don't want to move too slow with the mechanics that we're introducing. And it's still there. We still have all those assets, but it's not currently in the scope of the design.
Perfect.
Aside from that, though, of course, all of the outfits, customization, standard stuff that you see in game.
Great. This one's gonna be more for Owen. We're getting back into like how the NFTs might work. Will the game NFTs generate passive value, or are they mostly going to be traded and sold? Will they come with passive abilities like small percentages of earnings for tokens or something in game?
Yeah, so when you look at the actual in-game stuff, as in how it's used in-game, that would be the main kind of, I suppose, value proposition that would come from it when it comes to having an NFTized version of it. That what it generates in-game is what you would stand to get from it in, either having a loan of it or, buying it off OpenSea or trading it, anything like that. So it comes down to really the overall game design on that side of it, on, what kind of more I suppose, direct return you'd see from anything that you did pick up on OpenSea. But there are also things we're looking at that could be around, if we're developing a staking farm, essentially, having a global community and stuff like that, there is a possibility that, other things could be added to that as a reward. But it's nothing that we're able to give any, I suppose, concrete information on as of this time. Right now, we're kind of looking at, I suppose, how the game develops and how we can suitably add things to it that will be on chain in a sense that it's rewarding in game rather than you picking it up solely because of something completely intangible that would be offered with it. So we're looking more at prior to that.
Perfect. Next question. We might not be able to answer this at this time, but how does the game directly relate to our token as the Dogira token?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that is covered in the white paper that in anything we do develop, there will always be a link going back to the Dogira token. And that can come from, having any. Sorry, I'm just trying to think of how to word this without making any particular promises on it. But let's say, for example, that if there was a game that was using an on-chain currency for, say, premium currency or anything like that, that is stuff that you'd be able to stake out by locking yourself into the Dogira pools that we currently have at the moment. There's other stuff as well, like, royalty fees that might come off of OpenSea might be used to set up burning pools for Dogira, etc. As we said, we don't look to kind of, hard tie in our token onto games where it might not be suitable in some areas. Like, I mean, if you were to look at, like, let's just say the energy system that was used there, you could state that, those are literally Dogira tokens and you can dump them in, but that would be a terrible gameplay choice. As if the price of the token went up, then it becomes completely unplayable if somebody needs, a couple of thousand of those. Similarly, we could see major emission issues if people are generating essentially a lot of Dogira tokens. It kind of takes it out of being its own game. And being honest, it's a type of, I suppose, economy that just would not be sustainable at all. So the Dojiva token goes, into games directly in places where it might suit it. If there isn't something that we find that suits it very well, then we're not going to force that into any title. There's other things as well that we could be looking at, just bare bones cosmetics, or using it as the premium currency, stuff like that. Of course, everything I'm saying right here, this is not, promising what's going to be made available in Humaniquarium. There's a lot of different ways that our token can be directly integrated with games. But in the case where, we don't see something that would be suitable and that it would add value to the actual game, that's kind of a case where we'd look to have the link more so being across, our staking pools and having, access to NFTs that we're able to give to the community, stuff like that. So there's a lot of ways that we can tie the Dogira token onto the games that are being published under Dogira Studios and, partners like Jupiter Lighthouse that are developing on those. We're able to bring that into a relevant point for Dogira without having to shoehorn in, just throw this on chain and leave it at that. I think that's the philosophy we've always taken towards, any kind of games development that was going on. You don't have to hard tie it to the Dogira, token. I mean, it can only really be done for one game. If we use Dogira as the currency in multiple different game worlds, and essentially an economic boom in one of those could cause a massive recession in another game where things have suddenly gotten way too expensive and the emissions are way too low. So yeah, we always look at having, a link that makes sense between everything that's built. But yeah, I wouldn't look towards, shoehorning in any functionality that doesn't need to be there. It all falls under what's the actual overarching game design and game philosophy that we're running with here, and how can we make it work? So we'll have more, I suppose, detailed information on, how that link will be made in the near future. But right now, we're obviously focusing more towards development in the side of fun rather than development in the side of, shove a token in here.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. Can we neglect the trees and let it die, or could it be eaten by critters if we don't take care of it properly?
Um, so that's another idea that's been kicking around is that these are actual NFTs if you've linked your wallet to it. At least that's what we've been moving forward with so far. And I'm really interested in the idea of like, can you neglect an NFT to death? It's a weird thing, but like, I'm not opposed to that at all. I don't think that it will be the base baseline of what you do in the game, but maybe it's something on the horizon. But yeah.
It is. Oh, there's always been something with me when there's something that can, be neglected to death. It's like it's got good sides and bad sides. Like my thing is, if somebody's taking off for 2 weeks on holiday, if they were playing Animal Crossing or whatever, they shouldn't come back to all the villagers being starved to death, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. But there is also, the interesting gameplay mechanic of it. So yeah, it's a good question. Definitely something worth kind of knocking around with a little bit more.
I am definitely interested in like just the pure mechanical question of that. And like, is that a fun thing? Would I be more inclined for like me personally to want to, I don't know, take care of this thing? It's interesting.
There's also the implications of its tethering to NFTs, because I mean that means the NFT itself could die over time. It's like, so there's a lot of implications we'd have to consider in that respect. Another possibility is just the tree degrades in quality over time and doesn't necessarily, like in how in Animal Crossing your place gets messy and you get cockroaches and stuff, but it doesn't necessarily die. Is another potential there, I guess you
Mm.
could say.
No
So
way,
you'd
we
have to
want to
leave.
be the Dark Souls of Animal Crossing.
Oh man. Um, so this is a question again about the trees themselves. So the trees are procedurally generated. Are there going to be certain archetypes or categories that the trees will kind of randomly iterate from? Like for
Uh,
example, would there be like Christmas trees or some other like a willow or a weeping willow or something like that?
oh yeah, absolutely. And we are starting it off like our baseline, just because it's an easy structure to work with, is the different types of bonsai sculpture, like how people actually form bonsai in the real world. We're using that for the basis of how we're going to train uh, this seed to like generate a tree, so that you won't necessarily know what it is when you plant it, but it will grow into a cascading type or you know um, an informal upright. Like there's a bunch of different types, and I think that's the easiest approach is to do those first and then expand outwards. But that being said, different species of trees that also follow those same restrictions are also going to be in the release build. That is like first and foremost.
Great. Um, are we going to see any sort of limited supply with these trees, or are we looking at potentially like a long term? Because we want to make sure that players can actually play the game. New players in particular. So is there going to be some sort of limited supply? Will it be limited in some way? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Um, yes, like it's definitely important that you don't have a million of these, but in the same regards, it is important that new players can jump in and that they're not held back. So there will be some form of restrictions on how you acquire and how many you can get, but there also won't be like a hard cap on limit. I don't think. We might have to figure that out a little bit more in the future.
Yeah,
Subject to
it's
change.
it's certainly an interesting question, and I think that really comes back into the, I suppose, more play to earn side of gaming. That obviously, if things are rare, then basically that scarcity can make things start going up. And yeah, I think you've put it really well, Andy, that you don't want to see a hyperinflation, but similarly, you don't want to see people literally not being able to play the game because it costs 5 ether to pick up a tree, stuff like
Hmm.
that. So yeah, definitely an interesting economical design question.
One approach that I have been considering is instead of limiting the plants that you can get, limit the planters that you can get,
Mm.
so that like you can have a bunch of little ones, but the upper echelons, like those are really worked for and earned.
Yeah, absolutely. And like as we're talking about there, if somebody's been working on, one of their jars for over a year, we would imagine that, that would have a lot more interest in it than somebody who might just, jump into the game for one day. So I think there'll be very different kind of NFT levels that we see in this kind of stuff. That you're not going to require somebody to be coughing up enough ether for a year-old bonsai. Like you're going to want them to be able to get in on the ground level, and that does require the ability to be able to make new jars, new trees, stuff like that.
Hmm.
So I kind of guess maybe a good question to end on. I've been seeing a lot of questions about this. Um, what is the access to the game going to look like? Is it going to be a free to play model? Is it going to be a fee of some sort to get into the game? I know that well, I don't know if we want to answer that if we've really had that ironed out yet. But
Yeah,
either Andy or
it's
Owen.
in yeah, it's something that we have been discussing over. We don't have any direct answer to give on that one yet. Now, generally, if something is on chain, you would typically need to see some level of access fee into it. Now, often that can be quite small. It again, a lot of it comes down to how you acquire the actual, the bonsai jar, the tree, stuff like that, how you get started. But it's all stuff that we're discussing at the moment and finding out, what's the most kind of fair and I suppose inclusive way that we're able to do that without, any fear of, hyperinflationary issues, stuff like that. So something that we'll definitely have more info for you on in the future.
Hmm.
Ooh, we got more AMA questions. Can we turn this into a clone of Rampage, but with the Dogira model?
Yes.
Absolutely.
I think that's like the number one reason that Dylan and I switched to using the mecha anim instead of Legacy is so that we could have Godzilla-sized critters running around for mini games. No spoilers, but
Is there anything that you guys would want to um, add, before we wrap up? I see a lot of people asking for dates. I don't think we're going to give a date right now.
No, I
So,
mean, yeah, as I said earlier, we're more interested in like the level of care that's gone into this so far has been fantastic, and it's something that we want to see continue on. We're not pushing for, a date to be given in, I mean, it has to be out in a month or it has to be out in 2 weeks, stuff like that. So yeah, then we will give out, more specific dates as we kind of approach closer to the times that we have in mind. But it's not something that we're kind of putting down in the sand at the moment. But I think, showing a little bit more progress as we're going along, we'll definitely be able to, show off a little bit more of it, give out a little few more screenshots, things like that. But yeah, there's a lot we can do before, we have to just straight out state this is the date we're launching on. As there's a lot of projects that we've all seen to date now where they've given a pie in the sky date on games being released and they've either been missed or the quality has been way off what you were expecting. And that's something we're trying to avoid in our own development philosophy.
I would also like to tack on an open invitation, which I may regret later, that now that this is announced, if anybody has any ideas or there's stuff you think that you would like about it, that you don't like about it, pop over into that gaming channel and let me know. Because I read that thing regularly, but it's
oh,
usually just Becco saying,
But I think in the Dogira General channel, that would be a great place to kick off chat about it. And when we have a little bit more information out on the game, I think having its own category would actually be fantastic.
okay. Well, I think that really pretty much covers everything. I don't see any other questions hanging out that we can answer right now. How's everybody feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I for one, I'll speak on behalf of the community, and like I'm delighted to be able to actually see this getting showcased. I mean, obviously we saw it internally quite a while ago now, but even just the progress being made in that time, it's really exciting to see, and it's been fantastic working with the Jupiter Lighthouse team, both Andy and Dylan on it. So yeah, kudos on it, and long may it last. This is I mean, it's really fantastic to be able to see games of this quality and with this amount of kind of love, care, and attention being put into them as something that we'll be able to release under a Dogira banner. It's fantastic on our side. So, on behalf of the community, I'd like to thank both of you for all the hard work gone into this to date, and I'm sure they'll join me in stating that we can't wait to play.
"Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate it." The partnership has been delightful from both ways, I think. Um,
Awesome.
Dogira team has been very willing to let us just run in a very determined direction, and I appreciate it. We've really been able to be creative for this, so thank you.
Yeah, not at all. I think that is the best thing about what we're seeing coming into blockchain gaming right now. That we're seeing indie developers be able to really take a chance on what they're making and go back to building all these kind of unique experiences, which to me, I'm absolutely loving seeing it and really happy to be working with your team and getting this kind of, fully built across the finish line and getting it into the hands of players. I think this is really the type of game that blockchain can really benefit.
Let's do it.
Well, everybody, this has been our presentation of Humaniquarium. If you have any other questions, definitely pop in a general, ask them, or jump in a Telegram, talk about it, and help us get the word out.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, thanks to everybody that jumped in, and thanks a million to the Jupiter Lighthouse team, both Andy and Dylan, for showing off their progress today.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great
Thanks
night.
a million, folks. Speak soon.
Talk to you then.
Toodles, y'all.